Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mentor Me podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Hall, and today's episode is with Rich Diviney. Rich Diviney has over 20 years of experience as a Navy SEAL officer, where he had over 13 deployments overseas, 11 of which were to Iraq and Afghanistan. Throughout his career, he achieved multiple leadership positions, including the commanding officer of a Navy SEAL command. I want to thank Rich first and foremost for the sacrifice and dedication that he has made to our country and for all of us. I just want to thank Rich for that. I mentioned it on the podcast, but I want to make sure I give that credit to him as well in the intro and outro of this podcast, because it's truly amazing what these people sacrifice for us. And since Rich retired from the Navy in 2017, he's become a well-renowned speaker and consultant with the Chapman Co Leadership Institute, as well as Simon Sinek Incorporated. Rich's mission is to help others realize their potential and witness them accelerate towards it through building attributes. Also, he's the author of The Attributes, a book he authored from his 20 plus years of experience in the Navy. In this episode, Rich details the difference between skills and attributes, and we talk about something I'd never expected to talk to a Navy SEAL about, the importance of humor. I really hope you enjoy this episode with Rich Diviney.
Yeah, it's a little bit of it was a little bit of both. I grew up. I have a twin brother, and my twin brother and I wanted to be Navy pilots since from the time we were like 6 or 7 years old. That was our goal.
Wow.
And so I was quite focused on that pathway all through high school, and had planned. My plan was to go to college. Go do some ROTC. Well, I wanted to go to the academy, but my grades weren't good enough, so I was going to go to ROTC. Um, and it was the 90s. It was the first Gulf War, which was in 1990, and it was right after that I learned about what the Navy SEALs were, and I said, oh, that seems pretty cool. And then I went to Purdue, was joined up in ROTC, and really found myself kind of struggling with this idea that I didn't want to be a pilot and wonder if I could be a SEAL. And I had, up to that point, seemingly, like in high school, I wasn't really a good athlete, but I joined the lacrosse team, and because I thought it was cool, and I figured I'd try, and I just found I had consistently thrown myself into discomfort, somewhat unconsciously, and tried to surround myself with people who were better than me, and I felt like this was an opportunity, and so I applied. And in some cases, ignorance is a little bit of bliss. I mean, I'd read a bunch of SEAL books, but you can't read enough to prepare you for the actual experience. So,
Right.
so the actual experience was somewhat of a Mack truck. But again, by the time I got hit with a Mack truck, by the time I kind of woke up and came to, it was almost done, right? So, and I hadn't quit. Um, and so there was a goal, but it was adaptable. And I always say, one of people ask me a lot, hey, if there's one piece of advice I have for people, business folks or even younger folks, who are pursuing things, I would say be resolute in your outcome, but be flexible in the pathway, right? In other words, if you know what you want to do, and you know where you want to head, okay, be resolute in that, but understand that as you move towards that, the pathway that you planned is probably not going to happen, right? It's going to change along the way. That sometimes derails people, because it's unexpected, it's uncertain, it's challenging. But we only need to look at the rock climbers, for example, on this. And I'm not a rock climber because I hate heights, but the rock climber who looks at the face of the cliff and says, "Okay, I'm getting to the top," and then begins to climb. That climber is going to be looking for footholds and handholds along the route, and it's going to be a zigzag pattern. And sometimes the best foothold or handhold is going to be maybe down or lateral, which means that for a moment that rock climber is going to be moving away from their goal to find the better foothold. So, and sometimes that's what it's going to feel like. When you're moving towards a goal, you might be going down a path that feels like, man, this doesn't feel like it's in line with or in the direction of my goal at all. But rest assured, it probably is. You're getting a better foothold. So I think that's what happened to me, and I think advice to anybody who's in that situation, especially the younger folks, is that life is uncertain. The environment, the world we live in is uncertain. Maybe in some ways more uncertain than it ever was. But I would that could probably be debated amongst generations.
Yeah.
It's going to be uncertain no matter what. So be flexible is my thought, and that's what I was.
So you mentioned you um, had the idea of being a pilot uh, from an early age, you and your twin brother. What was the desire that was in your heart that early at a young age? What did that come from? Was that from a family member, or was that just something you desired?
Well, my dad was a private pilot, so we'd go flying with him every weekend. So we loved flying. And
Yeah.
then one of my older cousins had joined the Navy, and he was a Navy pilot. And we said, man, the Navy pilots. I mean, we could have gone Air Force. I mean, we loved all the jets, didn't matter what service. But we said the Navy pilots, those guys land on ships. I mean, what's
Yeah.
harder than that? That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. And so that was we kind of had our hearts set on that pathway, just because it seemed probably because it seemed a little bit more difficult and cooler. Cool. The cool factor has to weigh into it a little bit. That's okay. It's okay to seek something that seems a little cool as long as you're resolute, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Rich, what were a couple of habits that you picked up in the Navy that you didn't have before that you still stick with today and you're like, this changed my life?
Yeah. Well, let me give you a habit that I picked up well before the Navy that I've used my entire life, and then I'll talk about one that I picked up in the Navy. The first habit that I picked up that has changed the course of my life is this idea of asking better questions. We are neurologically designed to answer questions. That's what our brains do all the time. That's how we're understanding our environment, and usually it's an unconscious act. However, when we consciously uh, lodge a question into our forebrain, our conscious mind, our brain has no choice but to come up with answers. It's just going to start answering that question. Anybody can take this experiment, and I usually do this in workshops. I say, okay, take out a piece of paper and answer this question: how would you double your income in the next 6 months? Okay, and I give the group 30 seconds. I say, in 30 seconds, write down anything and everything that pops into your head. Okay, and within 30 seconds, you get people with two, three, four, five, six, maybe six answers. Okay. Now, the quality of those answers is debatable, right? Some of them are ridiculous, some of them make no sense. However,
Yeah.
the point is that when you lodge that question, your brain begins to answer it. Now, oftentimes we do this the wrong way, right? We say things like, "Why does this always happen to me? Why am I so bad at this? Why are these people out to get me?" Right? And our brain begins to answer those questions, whether we like it or not. And those answers are not empowering. And what I learned early on was be deliberate in the questions you ask and change the framing. How can I get better at this? What am I strong at? Who's out there that can help me? If you ask those questions, your brain will begin to come up with answers, and you will begin to come up with some answers that don't make much sense, but some answers that are pretty darn good. I've done this my entire life, and I am a true believer in the fact that our lives, the quality of our lives, is directly proportional to the quality of questions we consistently ask ourselves. So that was number one. And I think number two, though, what I learned in the military that I've kept and I will continue to keep is this idea of planning and kind of discipline in planning. To kind of look ahead to the extent that you can, and plan to the extent that you can. But it's kind of the 80-20 rule. I can plan for about 80% of what I think is going to happen, and then I have to just be confident that I can handle the 20% that I can't predict, right?
Yeah.
But doing the diligence on that 80%, or as much percentage as you can get, is a good and practical endeavor. And I think it helps set you up for comfort when things go a way that you can implement a plan that you've gotten through. But it clears your head a little bit to prepare for uncertainty as well, because you can say, well, I don't have to worry about this percentage of things because I have a plan for that if it happens, and that clears
Right.
your mind for that which you haven't planned. So I think that I always kind of approach things in that way, and that kind of look ahead and kind of plan as much as I can, but then be relaxed about what I can't control.
Yeah, I want to hit on that first point you made, asking better questions, because I think a lot of us can get in that rut of seeing the challenge, but not, and really asking ourselves questions are directed solely at the problem instead of the solution.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you, as you were going through Navy SEAL training, like what were the questions you were asking yourself, and what did you see maybe people that didn't make it through Navy SEAL training? what did you notice in them that they were asking in their head?
Yeah. Well, so the idea of asking better questions first starts with focus. Okay. We attract and we steer towards what we focus. So I got to go to when I was a SEAL, I got to go to several racing schools, which is fun. I love driving, and you just learn how to drive cars in different environments and on racetracks and things like that, and motorcycles. It's loads of fun. One of the very first lessons when you're at racing school that an instructor will teach you is that when you begin to lose control of the vehicle begins to spin out or whatever or skid, immediately look where you want to go. Okay, because the car is going to feel like it's going to go to the wall, right? But if you're looking at the wall, you will hit the wall. Okay, if you look to where you want to go, center of the road or something, you will automatically begin steering that direction. This is proven out. I mean, you see these these, and any cop can probably verify this. These accidents where there's like one telephone pole in like a 10-mile stretch and the car hits that telephone pole, right? I mean,
Right.
and it's because in that moment the driver focused on the telephone pole and they steered the car there. And so we unconsciously steer towards what we focus on. So if you choose to focus on certain things, and you can do this by questions, then you will move towards it. In SEAL training, I think what all of us had probably intuitively and unconsciously we developed this in a way that allowed us to get through SEAL training was the ability to, in a moment of deep challenge, uncertainty, and stress, to not concern ourselves with that which we couldn't control, okay, because that's a waste of time and energy, and B, ask ourselves immediately, what can I control in this moment, and then move towards that. And it's kind of a more nuanced version of eating the elephant one bite at a time, right? Because what you're doing is you're saying, okay, I, you know, I can't. There's not much I can do. So in SEAL training, for example, they do surf torture. Okay, that's where you lock arms, you lay back in the surf zone, and the waves crash over you, and it's the coldest thing you could ever imagine, right? And you do this for hours, which seems like you're freezing in the middle of the night. And I remember being in surf torture and saying to myself, "Man, I'm freezing. Okay, but I'm just going to think about soon I'm going to be on the beach doing push-ups until I'm really hot, right? I'll just that's what I'll just wait until I'm doing push-ups, right? That's what I focused on. It was literally step by step. And I remember doing push-ups until I was really, and I was just burning up, and I was so tired. I was like, well, soon I'll be in the surf zone, cooling off, right? So it's this idea of stepping through by asking the question, what can I control and what should I focus on now? Move to that,
Yeah.
and then asking the question again and again and again. And I think the guys who didn't, there's actually a saying in Hell Week, a truism, I should say. So Hell Week, just for your audience, is it's kind of the coup de grace of SEAL training, right? You start on a Sunday afternoon and you go from Sunday afternoon till Friday. The whole week you sleep maybe 2 hours the entire week, and you go nonstop. You're doing physical stuff, you're doing swims, you're just it's crushing, right? You're cold, you're sandy, you're wet, and you get most quitters during that process. Almost all the quitters happen during Hell Week. Well, there's a saying that if you think about Friday of Hell Week on Monday, you'll never make it. Okay, because you're focusing way too far in the future, and I think this is a mistake most people make, especially when kind of pursuing long-term goals, is they're thinking about. I mean, again, be resolute in the outcome. I know on the horizon it's there, right? But I can't control or worry about that right now. I need to control and worry about now, and what's the next thing I can move towards. And I think that's what guys who make it through had the ability to that other guys did not so much.
Yeah. Wow, that's so good. And what I'm curious about is while you're in the Navy and then now doing what you're doing, which is kind of consultant work, working with a lot of different businesses, helping them build these attributes, which we're going to talk about your new book coming up. But did you see what is the typical question that you see people in the business world asking themselves that isn't right? Or what do you have to oftentimes change their questioning towards?
Well, this is a great segue into why I wrote the attributes, because that's the answer, is that they confuse skills with attributes when they're trying to put together teams. And the question, one of the things that prompted me to write the book, even though I had been thinking about it for a decade or so, was this idea that I kept on talking to organizations, and they'd come up to me and say, because I was talking about leadership and high performing teams, and they'd say, "Hey, Rich, we're putting together these dream teams. I mean, these just rock star people with all like the best salesperson, the best graphics designer, best marketer, just rock stars, top graduate. Yet when they're getting together and starting to working and uncertainty and challenge hits, right, the team starts falling apart, right? It becomes toxic. what's going on? And I said, what's going on is you're focusing on the wrong thing. You're selecting based on skills versus attributes. And so the difference is they get conflated all the time, but the difference is fairly stark. Skills are not inherent to our nature. Okay, so we're not born with the ability to throw a ball, ride a bike, or drive a car. They could be taught and they could be trained, right? And they direct our behavior in known situations. Here's how, when to throw a ball, ride a bike, or drive a car. And then as such, because they're kind of visible, they're very easy to assess, measure, and test. You can see how well someone does any one of those things. Okay, it's why the businesses and teams get seduced by skills so easily. Okay, ooh, let's get the best this, the best that. A resume can say something like that. The problem with skills where they are deficient is they don't inform how we're going to show up in stress, challenge, and uncertainty. When the environment becomes complex and unknown, it's very difficult to apply a known skill to an unknown environment. So this is where we start leaning on attributes. Attributes are innate. Okay, all of us are born with levels of adaptability, of patience, of resilience, and of self-efficacy. Okay, we can see levels of this in small children. Now, certainly they develop over time, and environment helps, but we can see levels of it. They inform the way we show up to situations versus direct our behavior. So, in other words, my son's level of perseverance and adaptability, for example, and resilience informed the way he showed up when he was learning how to ride his bike, and he was falling off a dozen times doing so. And then because they're hidden in the background, they're very difficult to assess, measure, and test. I can't sit down across the table in an interview process and assess someone's level of adaptability or resilience. The most visceral and visible environments inside of which you can see this are environments of deep challenge, stress, and uncertainty, which made my laboratory of SEAL training such an interesting one, because it's all about challenge and stress and uncertainty. But what businesses don't understand is that if they want to design teams that work well together, especially when things are bad, because that's what high performing teams are. High performing teams are not only high performing when things are great, the best teams are also great when things are bad. Okay. The teams that perform well when things are bad and things are uncertain are those that have the attributes to do such, not just the skills. That's the biggest mistake that most businesses make in building teams and then hiring new people.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never thought of skills and attributes as two different things. I've kind of always intertwined them as the same thing. But that makes sense because you can be a great free throw shooter in basketball, and then all of a sudden, great free throw shooter when you're in the gym by yourself, and now shooting in front of a crowd of 50,000 and miss them all.
Totally. Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
it's put to the test, I get that. I'm curious, Rich, in your book, the attributes, are there any attributes that you've studied that are make or break attributes that if you don't have this, you're not going to gel on the team? I get that you can always work on your attributes. Are there any that are like make or break? If you don't grow this, you might not be a great team member.
Well, so in the book, I break it out into categories, right? So I have what are the attributes that make up grit, what are the attributes that make up mental acuity, attributes that make up drive, attributes that make up leadership, and then attributes that make up team ability. And so the attributes in the team ability category, which are integrity, conscientiousness, humility, and humor, those are all attributes that serve very well on a team. However, it really is up to the team. Okay, so first of all, we all of us as individuals, we're all born with all of the attributes. Okay, we have every single one. The difference in each one of us is the extent to which we have each. Right. So, for example, from a scale of 1 to 10, if 10's high, I might be a level 8 in adaptability, which means when the environment changes around me without my control, outside of my control, it's fairly easy for me to go with the flow, and adapt. Okay. Another person might be a level 3, which means when the entire environment changes around them, it's very difficult for them to adapt to go with the flow. They still do because humans are innately adaptable, okay? But it's more difficult for them. So we all show up with different levels, okay? Now there's no judgment in that. That'd be like me judging my hair color, okay, and being mad that my hair's not red, okay? It's insane, right? It's silly. So there's no judgment in where we show up. It's just who we are. Where we begin to place value on attributes is how they apply to specific teams. Okay, so for example, the list of attributes required to be a great Navy SEAL is going to be different than the list of attributes required to be a great nursing team or a great teacher or a great, whatever, you name it, salesperson.
Yeah.
So that's really when you can start to apply judgment, and that's where your question would be applicable. And the answer would be, or the question to follow your question would be, well, it depends on the team. Okay.
Sure.
In a SEAL team, Okay, but I would say a lack of courage is a bad thing.
Yeah, right,
If
right.
you're low on courage, you're probably not going to be a very good Navy SEAL. Okay, in a nursing team, a lack of empathy is probably a bad thing, right? So it's very highly dependent on the team itself, and it's a responsibility of each team in business to figure out which attributes are required and important for their specific endeavor.
I'm curious, one of the ones you mentioned is humor.
Yeah.
In the Navy, did you see humor as one that was high or low? Did you have to have a high sense of humor to like get through it and like joke around with other guys and gals
Um,
in there?
People might find this surprising that humor was probably the most predominant attribute in the Navy SEAL teams,
No
and
way.
it was amazing to me because I love laughing, and I've always kind of loved making jokes. But
Yeah.
things get so bad. I mean, you're in SEAL training, and things are so bad that guys just start making jokes,
Yeah.
because inherently, what humor is a hack. It's a hack to keep on going. And I
Yeah.
talk about this in the book, but when we laugh, which is an involuntary response, we're flooded with three chemicals. One is dopamine, okay, a neurotransmitter dopamine, which tells us this is good, keep doing this, okay. The second is our endorphins, okay, another neurotransmitter that masks pain. Okay, they're opiates for they're human-made opiates that mask our pain. And the third is oxytocin, which is kind of it's a hormone. It sometimes moves as fast as a neurotransmitter, but it's a hormone, and that's the bonding chemical. So when we laugh, we get flooded with all three of those. So what's happening? So I tell the story about SEAL training. Surf torture, coldest thing you could imagine. You're sitting laying in the surf zone, middle of the night, and oftentimes the instructors will pull up a van on the beach, and they'll come out with a megaphone and they'll say, "Okay, anybody who quits right now, we have hot chocolate, blankets, and donuts. You can have it's kind of like a survivor challenge thing, right?
Right.
um, Hot chocolate, donuts, and blankets for anybody who quits right now, and you get a lot of people quitting. You really do.
I
I,
bet.
I remember that happening to us. I was in the surf zone, and immediately the guy to my right yells at the top of his lungs. He's like, "Hey, do you have any chocolate glazed donuts? Because if you don't, I'm not quitting." Okay. And I burst out laughing, and he burst out laughing.
Yeah.
And I remember in that moment thinking, we're going to be okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then I looked to my left, though, and the guy to my left he was stone faced. Didn't even hear the joke. I mean, he was lost in his pain. And I remember literally saying to myself, it's like, he's probably not going to make it. And sure enough,
Huh.
within a minute or two, he quit.
Wow.
So what happened there was when my buddy made that joke, right? Immediately I was flooded with dopamine saying, "Keep going, this is good." Endorphins, which is like, this doesn't feel so bad, and then
Yeah.
oxytocin. We're in this together. I got you, you
Wow.
got me, right? So humor becomes a hack, and I've never met a high performing team that hasn't had at least one class clown. I call it someone who is the one who just cracks a joke when things are shitty. I mean, and honestly, I can remember times. It's probably what I missed most about the team. What I miss most about the teams is the laughing. I mean, I remember times we were laughing so hard we were crying, and the environment around us was miserable, right? And we just couldn't. I mean, it was just someone was said something so insanely funny, you just laugh, and it's so powerful that it started getting me in trouble when I became a civilian, right? And I'm with my wife and I are with a bunch of normal people, and someone's talking about like something bad that happened in their lives, and I'm not saying really bad, but something that I would consider like, hey, that's not a big deal. And I
Yeah.
make some sort of joke and I start laughing, or I laugh at their pain, and my wife's like,
Yeah.
"Why are you laughing?" I was like, "Because it's funny, right?"
Yeah. Yeah.
It's because we're used to that, right? And so humor is incredibly important for all of us. It's why you hear sometimes of cancer survivors saying, "You know what? I got through it because I started watching funny movies all the time,
Huh.
and I just started laughing more, right?" Laughing is enormous. It's one of the most important things we can do, I think, as human beings and for our health.
Wow. Do you think humor is a huge key in building trust too?
I do because of that chemical exchange, because of the oxytocin.
Sure.
Oxytocin is kind of a trust chemical, right? So you're exchanging that, and we know. I mean, this is why most people will consider humor as a one of the top qualities they look for in a mate, right?
Mm.
Male or female, because what that's doing is that when someone's making us laugh, it's giving us unconscious signal. Hey, this person A will be there for me when things are rough, right? And B, they make me feel good, and C, that they're bonding, right? So it is definitely a factor. It's not the only factor, right? But it certainly is a factor.
It seems like there's always something funnier too when you're up against a wall and you feel screwed and
Yeah,
someone cracks a joke and you,
yeah,
like you said, you would be on the ground crying
yeah.
laughing. And I just think of, movies and just when I've laughed the hardest is usually when like the character in the movie is screwed and like,
Right, right.
they're
Well, and
mega
so
screwed.
again, for people who might not find themselves or consider themselves to be the funny one, you don't have to be the funny one, right? You have to be someone who can laugh, right? Who can laugh when someone makes a joke. So great if you're the funny one. And I was not necessarily the class clown in my SEAL team. We had a bunch of class clowns,
Yeah.
so they were the ones making the jokes. I just always laughed, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is if you can laugh, if you can find the funny, do it, right? You don't have to
Yeah.
necessarily make the funny, but
Yeah. Yeah.
if you can do both, even better. But find the funny certainly.
That's so interesting. Um, what are some keys to changing your environment? You had kind of mentioned that one attribute being able to kind of change what's happening around you, or at
Hmm.
least change your perception of what's happening around you.
Right.
And you probably had to do a lot of that throughout your Navy training. What are some keys that you picked up throughout that?
Yeah, you cannot necessarily change what's happening around you, but you
Yeah.
can do what you said. You can change the perception of what's happening around you. And you do that with better questions. You do that with an ability to think through an environment. So that will involve being able to mitigate your autonomic response of anxiety and fear. Okay, so you bring down those anxiety. When we get anxious, we get fearful, we start building up that autonomic response. We tend to start getting sweaty, our pupils dilate, we're getting focused, we're in some ways, as fear begins to rise, our forebrain is actually starting to come offline. We're starting to get more into a autonomic limbic response, which is kind of a lack of conscious control. So the ability to come off that, so you can manage that anxiety by doing some physiological things, proper breathing. There are breathing techniques that can start bringing you down. Some visual tools that you can use to bring it down. Visualization can help you bring it down. So that's one way you can manage the internal response of fear. The external environment, it's all about getting yourself to a place where you can consciously think through an environment, ask the proper questions. Uncertainty is what causes anxiety, uncertainty is what causes fear to start bubbling up. Our inability to understand an environment. Okay, you can begin to buy down uncertainty in an environment by simply asking yourself, okay, what about this do I understand? And then in that, about whatever that percentage is, what can I now control? Okay, because you're basically taking charge, you're taking control, you're creating certainty out of uncertainty, even if it's just a step. This is why, um, you know, depending on the situation, you may be in a position where the only thing you can do is take one step forward. Okay, that's fine. You just took a step forward. And oh, by the way, your brain will give you a dopamine reward for doing that. Then once you take that step, you need to ask the question again. Okay, now what can I control? That might be another
Mm.
step, or it might be two steps, or whatever. That's one way we can begin to basically start chunking certain elements of an uncertain environment and moving through stress, challenge, and uncertainty when things are going on that we just don't understand.
The last thing I expected to talk to a Navy SEAL about today was humor, but I'm so glad we did. That was the best. Before you go, Rich, I just have some fun lifestyle questions for you.
Sure.
Um, do you have a morning or daily routine that you do every single day?
I try to, as best I can, implement some routine into my daily rhythm, and that routine usually looks like get up. I don't like necessarily getting up too early, but I like getting up before people in the house do. Having some coffee, getting some time to think, maybe get some creative time in, and then I like to spend time with my wife and my kids before they go to school, and then I like to usually work out, get a workout in the morning because I'm not a afternoon person, so I like to get my physical activity out of the way in the mornings. And that's kind of it. I typically fast in the morning because I don't. I'm just someone I'm not a big breakfast person, so it just makes me feel better. So if I had a routine, it'd be try to fast and work out in the mornings, and kind of maximize creativity in the mornings if I can. But I also stay a little bit looser. I'm not. I think I think we have to modulate ourselves. If you're way too focused and sometimes self-disciplined in certain routines, it can actually be detrimental to flexibility versus allow you to be adaptable.
Yeah.
But again, it's all up to the individual, right? Uh, so those things, some things I do, and I try to be grateful as much as I can. If I, I try to consistently remind myself and ask myself, okay, what am I grateful for?
Yeah.
Gratitude is a hugely powerful emotion, and it's a guaranteed way to make yourself feel better if you feel low. So
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's just, yeah, it kind of gives you a boost throughout the day too,
it really
to
does.
remind
Yeah,
yourself what you're grateful for.
yeah.
Do you journal at all throughout the day?
I don't, and I wish I did more. I have often throughout my 47 years said to myself, I need to journal, and I've attempted it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it hasn't worked out. I find, this is why I love the writing process so much. When I began writing the book, it was my version of getting down my thoughts in a way that I'd never before. So I don't have a journaling routine. I recommend the journaling routine for anybody who wants to do it because I think it's a great idea. Oftentimes, I'll come up with an idea, I'll jot it down somewhere, or I get my best ideas when I'm running actually, and
Mm.
so I started a while back. I started carrying a little recorder because my iPhone is too big, but I carried a little recorder so that if I got an idea, I just say it in the recorder while I was jogging.
Yeah.
That way, I wouldn't forget it by the time I was done, and then I'd write it down later. But I don't journal, but I recommend it, and I know got a bunch of guys who do, and it's a really cool thing to do. I should do more of it.
Have you had any, I mean, it sounds like you've had a lot of mentors throughout your life, um, whether it be in Navy SEAL training or even beyond that. What are a couple of the greatest lessons you've learned from mentors throughout your life?
Um, the one a couple I'd say the one of the most important ones is, and this is going to sound crass when I say it, but I'll explain it, is that we're entitled to nothing. Okay. Now, this is not, it's not necessarily literal as much as it is philosophical, right? And it's really, it's a state of mind to say, um, other than the air we breathe, you know, um, we should expect to work for things. Okay. We should, don't be afraid to put in the hard work. Don't think of yourself too lofty or big to get down and just do the dirty work. And I remember, I got out of the SEAL teams. I had spent almost 21 years in the teams. I had been a commanding officer. I'd been at some of the most elite teams on the planet. Okay, and I remember I got out of the Navy and I started doing some speaking. Right, and I did it because I didn't like speaking and I wanted to conquer that edge. And I remember being in the middle of nowhere, giving a talk to like 10 people who, half of whom were kind of looking at their phones. And I remember saying to myself, man, this is the gritty kind of dirty work, right? I mean, here I am, I have this great career behind me, and I'm sitting here giving a talk to half people who don't even want to hear it, right? And I said to myself, but this is where I'm supposed to be. This is the work that I need to put in. There's nothing special about me to grant me a position that is other than this position. I'm doing the hard work, and I think the mistake that a lot of people make, and I think a lot of people, some people accuse just the youth of making this, but I would say a lot of people make this decision or make this assumption is that we deserve something, we're entitled to something, and we think that the fast fix and the fast fame and the fast success is something we deserve. And that's the wrong attitude to go in. I think that's one of the biggest pieces of advice I've gotten. Better questions is a great piece of advice. The one one piece of advice I got, which speaks to the kind of the courage thing we were talking about, is beware the fearless leader. Okay, a senior officer told me that. He said, beware the fearless leader because he'll likely get you killed. Okay, fear is a good thing. Fear is designed to give us to inform us of risk, to allow us to take a pause and think about what we're going to do. Okay, there's nothing wrong with it. It's designed by evolution to do that, right? If you encounter someone who's quote fearless, give them a wide berth, okay? Because what's happening there is, if it's real, because a lot of times it's feigned, but if it's real fearlessness, be careful, because that person is not assessing risk properly. All right, and that's not a good thing. So use fear to your advantage to assess appropriate risk, and then feel the benefits of stepping into that fear and conquering it once you do. Courage cannot exist without fear. It's neurologically impossible. And so and because fear is because courage is the act of stepping into our fear, and they've discovered circuits in the brain that get fired specifically when you decide to fight, when you pick the fight response, which is step into our fear. There's a circuit in the brain that actually fires. When that circuit fires, we get a dopamine reward for that, and so we feel good. And it's designed to encourage us to keep moving. It's the neurology that's caused human beings to go from cave dwellers to space explorers, right? Because we're designed to keep going and step into our fear. If there is no fear, there is no courage, and there is no dopamine reward, and that means you're not assessing risk properly. So I think those are some of the lessons that I've used and continue to use.
That's so good. Rich, I just want to thank you. One, thank you for your service. And two, just thank you for making time for this. Really a pleasure to sit down with you, learn a little bit about humor, learn about your new book. To end it, where can people find you on social media? Where can they find your book and your website?
Yeah, absolutely. The website is theattributes.com. So you can go there. You can buy the book. You can purchase the book from there too. I have some assessment tools on there, so you can actually take an assessment to see where you stand on the grit attributes, the mental acuity attributes, and the drive attributes. That's free, so you can do that. So please visit that, and I have some workbooks there that you can get to help you develop attributes. But then also I'm on Instagram, Rich_Diviney on Instagram, and then on LinkedIn as well, and attributes page on Facebook. So yeah, and you can get to any of those from the website. So the website's probably a good landing pad.
Awesome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mentor Me podcast with Rich Diviney. I just want to thank Rich again for the service and sacrifice that he's made to our country and for all of us in it. And if you did enjoy this episode, go give it a rating wherever you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. Thank you so much.